I looked at the Pittsburgh Penguins sort of the way I do the Miami Heat. Great talent, marquee talent, best player in the sport, and they got swept. They got dominated. You got to want it. And sometimes there's a sense of entitlement. And I get that feeling watching the Heat. I don't know if Pierre feels the same way watching the Penguins, that there is a sense of entitlement. I'll give Boston all the credit in the world. They dominated them. But there's that feeling of Pittsburgh seemed entitled. Pierre McGuire will be working the finals tonight with Doc Emmerich. Eddie Olczyk, he joins us now. Pete, do you see that similarity there?
Sometimes, absolutely. You know, Dan, to take away what Boston did would be unfair to them. I thought the Boston Bruins played a phenomenal series, but the truth be told, the Pittsburgh Penguins did not compete at a high enough level to beat the Boston Bruins. Their power play was non-existent, and they were a team that lived on the power play. They didn't go the extra mile that you have to go to win in the playoffs, so I would agree with you.
But is there a sense of entitlement with hockey players? We usually talk about their mentality, where you see guys who have been coddled all their lives with these NBA players, maybe a football player, quarterback or two. Do you find that in the NHL?
No, because kids have to leave home at such an early age to go play, whether it's 14, 15, 16. It's really a transient lifestyle. It's not really an entitlement lifestyle. It's a hard-edged life, and it's a difficult one to make. We're one of the only global sports when you think about it. When the Iron Curtain came down in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when they started to have the influx of the Russians and the Czechs and the Slovaks and the Finns and the Swedes and you can go now. It's become so global. You have a lot of Germans playing in the league too. It made it much more difficult. So hockey's become a really difficult sport to make it to the highest levels, Dan. So that sense of entitlement really doesn't exist in the NHL.
More confidence coming in, Boston or Chicago?
Oh, I think both of them. I don't think there's more on one side or the other. I mean, Chicago, the way they were able to win their series against Detroit in a 7-game series in overtime, that gave them a lot of confidence that they carried into the next round against Los Angeles. And Dan, for Boston, the way they dispatched Pittsburgh that you were just alluding to was unbelievable. I mean, they held the Pittsburgh Penguins in a 4-game series to 2 goals. That's the number one offensive team in the National Hockey League during the regular season and on the power play, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they just devoured them. Zdeno Chara was huge, so I think both teams come in with huge amounts of confidence.
He's Pierre McGuire, Inside the Glass analyst, coming up tonight on NBC at 8 Eastern. It'll be Game 1 Stanley Cup Final. Coverage begins NHL Live at 7 p.m. Eastern on the NBC Sports Network. Which goalie has the better chance of being the dominating force here?
Well, they're different styles. Corey Crawford, I should say, is a lot more calm, cool, collected. He's anchored. Tuukka Rask is far more athletic. He's very agile. He's very flexible. He'll challenge a lot more. One is an angle goalie, Crawford, and one is a guy that just is so quick, it's scary, Tuukka Rask. So, again, two different styles, just like Chicago. Chicago plays an up-tempo, in-your-face game. Just like their goalie is going to be really square, really refined, and then the Boston Bruins, their goalie is really athletic, really quick, really flexible. So it's two different styles. Tuukka Rask is prone to giving up some bad goals because he's overactive from time to time, and Corey Crawford, outside of one bad goal against Minnesota in the first round of the playoffs, I haven't seen him give up too many bad goals.
From your vantage point, being inside the glass, what do you decide is something you can report on and you can't?
Well, I think you can report on anything, but the most important thing is you don't report on an injury that you see graphically. You can say a player's hurt. You don't say what it is. I think that's grossly unfair unless you see them obviously working on a shoulder or on a hand and it's on camera. Then you can report it. But, again, I'm not big into the vulgarity, and a lot of times when you're down low, Dan, you've been around sports long enough. There's a lot of bad stuff that's said from time to time. It's not a very sanitary place. So we'll say that, for instance, the last round, Brad Marchand from the Boston Bruins was challenging Brendan Morrow of the Pittsburgh Penguins, and it got personal, it got nasty, and the verbiage was ugly. You can report that they're having a nasty conversation. You don't have to say the words that they're saying.
John Tortorella always fascinated me. You can have personality like that, but you better win.
Yes, sir.
Did he have too much personality and not enough result?
Correct. All of the above. And I'm a friend of John's, and I think John's a real good coach. And I worked with John, and I coached a lot of games against John. I have the utmost respect for him as a professional. That being said, if you're going to act that way and you're going to alienate people and you're going to alienate some of your players, you better win. and they didn't win. The results weren't there. Last year, when you think about it, they were a team that should have been good enough to get to the Stanley Cup final. They didn't. They didn't get there because their first-round series against Ottawa won 7 games. Their second-round series against Washington won 7 games. And their style was very unforgiving, and it broke a lot of their players down, and they eventually lost in 6 games to New Jersey last year. This year, it's much the same. Their team broke down. They didn't have enough juice in the tank, and eventually they ran out of gas. And that's a big reason why John got fired.
You worked at the Olympics, the Summer Games, with Doc Emmerich on water polo. Tougher sport, women's water polo or the NHL?
Well, they're both barbaric. The women's water polo under the water is unbelievably nasty. I got to tell you, and the Australian ladies and the American ladies and the Spanish ladies, then the Romanian ladies, when they went after it, it was tough stuff. I still think the National Hockey League is a little bit more violent just because we have sticks in our hands, and they skated about 35 miles an hour, but water polo can be a nasty blood sport, Dan. It really can be.
Have you ever seen guys get stitched up near you on the bench?
In hockey?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. I've been stitched up on the bench, too. So, yeah, no, I've seen that. Absolutely.
Wait, you got stitched up during a broadcast?
No.
Oh, okay.
When I was a player a long time ago. Actually, you know what, Dan, I got to tell you, in Buffalo, New York, I was covering the Rangers and the Buffalo Sabres. Probably around 8 years ago, I got hit over the head with a stick, cut me badly. The trainer for the Buffalo Sabres, Rip Simonik, says, "Pete, you're bleeding bad." I said, "I'm aware of that." "Thanks, Rip." He says, "You're going to need some sutures." I said, "Okay." I got to finish the period, though. Finished the period, went in the Buffalo Sabres doctor's office, and they shot me up with surgical glue and closed the cut real quick.
Worst injury you ever saw?
Well, Gregory Campbell's would be right up there, the broken leg the other night. I did a game between San Jose and Colorado where Marco Sturm had a compound fracture of his ankle because of an icing race where he went into the boards. It was really nasty. I coached a player, Bruce Gardner, who had a compound fracture of his femur while he was playing for the Ottawa Senators. So I've seen some pretty nasty fractures over time.
Best player on the ice tonight will be?
Zdeno Chara.
Okay. Yeah, we've seen that before from him.
You know, Dan, he's the one thing. Everybody's talking about all these matchups and everything else. He's the one thing in this series that only one team has. You know, both teams have very creative center icemen. Both teams have very good goalies. Both teams have outstanding defensemen. Both teams have really good penalty killing. Both teams have outstanding coaches. Only one team has Chara.
But he's 6'8" without skates?
Yes. He's almost 7 feet with skates on, Dan. Dan, when you stand next to him and he's got skates on and you're trying to interview him, your arm gets sore.
It reminds me of Ted Hendricks, the Mad Stork.
Yes.
When he played linebacker, we had not seen anybody that height play linebacker. And you see Charo out there, and it's just like it's almost like Lurch with the Addams Family. You know, when he comes in, everybody else seems sort of normal in size, and then he walks in, you go, okay, that's different. And to be as dominating as he is, will that be the difference tonight? Be interesting, though. But a great matchup. We look forward to it, as always. Pete, we appreciate you joining us.
Pleasure visiting with you, Dan, and I want to congratulate you on your recent award. That's outstanding. Congratulations, Dan. Well earned.
Thank you, Pierre.
You're welcome.
All right, Pierre McGuire, NBC Sports, joining us from Chicago. Bruins, Blackhawks, Doc Emmerich, Eddie Olczyk tonight. Must-see TV, must-listen TV as well. Coverage begins NHL Live, 7 Eastern on the NBC Sports Network.